Vienna, 1907, just as the bells of Schönbrunn Palace rang in the hour of imperial tea. Francesca Valemont stood motionless beneath the linden arbor, her white gloves clenched tight at her sides. The scent of peonies and the low hum of bees wrapped around her like a net. Her ladies were still inside, fussing over corset stays and court shoes, but Francesca had slipped away with the ease of a girl who once climbed orchard trees in her petticoats. That girl was long buried beneath the weight of titles and duty, but sometimes in the quiet corners of the world she stirred. A brush of movement caught her eye. A man knelt in the rose beds, sleeves pushed up past his elbows, fingers stained with soil. He moved with unhurried purpose, trimming dead blooms from the Empress Josephine roses as if each one deserved a farewell. "Those were my mother's favorite," she said. He looked up, not startled, just aware. His face was sun-browned, hair a deep chestnut that curled at the nape, eyes the color of dark tea. He rose slowly, brushing his hands clean on his trousers, not bothering with a bow. "I know," he said. "You used to laugh when she let you plant bulbs upside down." Francesca's breath caught. "You remember that?" "You were 8, he said. "I was 12. You tried to name every tulip after a pastry. Croissant gold," she whispered, a smile breaking across her lips. "And strudel flame." He nodded. "I'm Cassian Odell. My father was head gardener before me." The name clicked into place. That summer before her governess was replaced by a stricter one, before her mother grew ill, she had played barefoot in the garden, shadowed by a boy who taught her the difference between weeds and wildflowers. "I thought you left," she said. "Went to Trieste to apprentice in the imperial greenhouses. Came back last year." He paused. "Didn't think you'd remember me." "I remembered your laugh," she said. "But more than that, I remembered that you knew mine." Cassian looked at her then, really looked. Not as the Archduchess Francesca, crowned heiress of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Just a woman in a garden. A sharp voice cut across the hedge. "Francesca, His Majesty requires your presence before the Hungarian delegation arrives." She turned, spine stiffening. "Coming, Baroness." Cassian didn't bow. He only nodded, eyes steady. That night, the palace was all gold and glass. Francesca sat beside her father, Emperor Leopold IV, her face composed beneath the weight of a diamond parure. The Hungarian delegation brought news of unrest in Transylvania, whispers of rebellion, demands for autonomy. Francesca listened, nodded, spoke when spoken to. Her gloves itched. She kept thinking of the way Cassian's hands had looked bare, honest. The next morning, she returned to the garden under the pretense of reviewing the floral arrangements for the Archduke's wedding. Cassian was already there, pruning the orange trees. "You shouldn't speak to me," she said. He didn't stop working. "And yet you came." She knelt beside him, ignoring the dirt. "I need to ask a favor." Cassian tilted his head. "There's a letter," she said. "From my mother, written before she died. It's in the library's restricted archive. They won't let me in not without an imperial decree. And you want me to get it? I know it's absurd, but you used to climb trees better than anyone." He gave a half smile. "Some things don't change." That night, he slipped through the servants' corridor, past the kitchens, up the back stairwell. The library was locked, but the windows weren't. He climbed, quiet as ivy. The letter was hidden beneath a false bottom in a French volume on medicinal botany. He tucked it into his coat and left the way he came. No one saw him. Francesca met him in the rose garden at dawn. The air held the sharp bite of late spring. She wore no jewels, only a simple blue gown with pearl buttons. Cassian handed her the letter. She read silently. When she looked up, her eyes were wet. She wrote that I must choose love, not duty. That marrying for politics would kill the part of me she cherished most. Cassian said nothing. "I'm being promised to the Prince of Saxony," she said, "to secure the alliance." Still, he said nothing. "I don't want it," she whispered. "I want someone who remembers my laugh." Cassian took a step closer. "Francesca, they'll never allow it. You're the heir. I'm still a woman." He reached out, brushed a loose curl from her cheek. The touch sent a tremor through her. "Tell me to stop," he said. She didn't. The next weeks passed in glances, in meetings beside the greenhouse at dusk, in notes hidden beneath flower pots. She learned that he'd once broken his arm falling from the west wall, that he preferred thunderstorms to sunshine, that his mother had been Italian and taught him to speak with his hands. He learned that she hated court music, that she dreamed of seeing Morocco, that she kept a notebook of pressed flowers under her mattress. But secrets don't stay buried in palaces. One evening, as they stood too close beneath the pergola, the Baroness caught them. Her gasp was sharp as a slap. "You disgrace your station," she spat. "You will marry the Saxon prince. And you," she turned to Cassian with contempt, "will be dismissed by morning." Francesca stood straighter. "No." The Baroness froze. "What did you say?" "I said no. You will not dismiss him. I will speak to my father. You will do no such thing." Francesca's voice was steel. "I am the heir. Try and stop me." That night, she went to Leopold IV and told him everything. The emperor listened. When she finished, he sighed, long and heavy. "You're my only child. My legacy. The empire needs stability. It needs truth," she said. "And I need Cassian." He looked at her, and something in his eyes softened. "Your mother would have liked him." Francesca blinked. "Then, you'll marry in secret. If the people accept it, if he proves himself, I'll give my blessing publicly. But no scandals, no rebellions." She ran to the garden. Cassian was waiting. "What did he say?" he asked. She smiled. "He said yes. On one condition." Cassian frowned. "What?" "You have to duel at dawn." His face went pale. "Who?" Francesca laughed. "No one. I just wanted to see if you'd do it." He stared, then laughed too, head thrown back. "You remembered my laugh," she said. "I never forgot." And when he kissed her, it wasn't a rebellion. It was a promise. The chapel was empty save for the scent of old wax and the hush that settles only in places built for silence. Francesca stepped inside without her attendants, her gloves tucked into one hand, her breath threading out in pale ribbons from the morning's chill. Light filtered through the high stained glass windows, painting fractured blues and reds onto the flagstones. She crossed herself, not from obligation, but from memory. Cassian stood at the rear alcove, his back to her, examining a carving of Saint Joseph cradling his tools. His coat was dusted with frost from the garden paths. At her footsteps, he didn't turn. "You're very early," she said, her voice low. "I couldn't sleep," he replied. The bees were restless in the hives. "Must be the cold." She walked to his side, careful not to brush against him. "I've never seen you in here." "I used to come with my father," he said. "He thought prayer was like watering. You didn't always see the difference it made, but you kept doing it anyway." Francesca looked at the saint's hands, carved with such care they seemed worn by real labor. "Were you close?" Cassian hesitated. "We spoke more in the garden than anywhere else." He wasn't a man for words. "And your mother?" She sang while pruning. Italian lullabies. I still remember her voice better than her face. Francesca pressed her hand to the stone ledge. "Is that why you never married?" she asked. He turned then, the corner of his mouth lifting not in jest, but in something quieter. "I never found someone who made things grow in me the way they did." She looked away. "The Saxon prince arrives next month. They're already drafting the announcement." Cassian's jaw moved, but he said nothing. "I could refuse," she said, "but it would fracture the court. My cousins circle like hawks." He studied her. "And if you don't refuse?" "I vanish into a cage with velvet walls." She looked at him then, her voice steady. "I'm not asking you to wait. I'm asking you to help me change the bars." Cassian nodded slowly. "There's a botanical commission leaving for Dalmatia next week. Your father's envoy is sponsoring it quietly. I've been asked to join." Francesca blinked. "Dalmatia? Wild orchids. Endemic species. If I go, I can build something outside the palace. Something real. If when you break the engagement, you'll need a place to land." She looked at the altar, at the flickering votive. "You're leaving." "I'm building us a future," he said. "One that doesn't need stolen hours." Her chest tightened. "How long?" 3 months. Unless the rains come early." She nodded once. "Write me, but not through the palace. Use the apothecary on Kirchen gas. I know the widow there. She'll pass them on." Cassian stepped closer. "You'll come when you can?" "I'll come when I must," she said. "And when it's safe, I'll never leave again." He didn't kiss her. Not in the chapel. Instead, he pressed his hand to hers, palm to palm, fingers aligning like petals folded for the night. That afternoon, as Francesca sat through a luncheon of boiled beef and strained diplomacy, she traced the shape of his touch against her skin, hidden beneath the linen of her sleeve. 3 days later, he was gone, the garden quieter without his footfall, the roses left to the junior apprentices. No announcement was made. The court scarcely noticed. Only the head chef remarked that the heir had suddenly taken an interest in the apothecary's tea blends. The letters began arriving precisely 2 weeks after his departure. Pressed between the pages were fragments of bark, petals dried to lace, and once, the tiny jawbone of a bird he'd found on a salt cliff. Each note was brief but precise descriptions of wind patterns, the angle of sunlight on limestone, a village child who'd asked if his boots were made of river stones. Francesca read them at night, by lamplight, beneath a quilt embroidered with her mother's initials. She answered in careful script, never naming him, never naming herself. Her words were folded and passed through the apothecary's old biscuit tin, tucked behind jars of wormwood and gentian. In court, she danced with the Saxon prince, who spoke only of cavalry and his mother's ailments. She smiled as required, drank sparingly, and never let her gaze drift toward the garden wing. Her father summoned her to the study in mid-April. He poured her a small glass of Tokaji and gestured for her to sit. "I received a report from Dalmatia," he said. "Your gardener has been appointed to oversee the new botanical annex. He's published a paper on endemic serpentine flora. The university in Graz has taken notice." Francesca sipped the wine. He's always had an eye for what others miss. Leopold leaned back. "You know the Saxons are pressing for the betrothal to be formalized before the Jubilee." She met his gaze evenly. "Then let them press. I will not sign. You realize what you're risking. I realize what I'm choosing." Her father watched her for a long moment. "You've grown sharper since your mother," he said. She would have been proud. Francesca stood, set her glass on the table, and turned to go. "Tell him," her father said behind her. "When he returns, tell him I'll receive him. As a guest, not a servant." She paused, her hand on the doorframe, but didn't turn. "I will," she said. As she left the study, the bells of the city told the hour. Beyond the palace walls, the first crocuses were blooming. The train from Trieste pulled into Wien's Sudbahnhof beneath a sky smeared with copper dusk. Cassian stepped down onto the platform, stiff from the journey, the familiar scent of coal smoke and damp stone curling in his chest like memory. He carried only a leather satchel, worn at the corners, and a wooden crate secured with twine. Inside were soil samples, plant sketches, and a single rolled parchment bearing the seal of the Imperial Botanical Commission. He made no stop at his family's old cottage near Hietzing. It stood empty now, windows shuttered, the fig tree in the yard long gone. Instead, he walked the eastern road toward Schönbrunn, each step measured as if the gravel itself might betray his intent. At the outer gate, the steward paused, eyeing the crate. "You've been expected." Cassian raised a brow. "Have I?" The man opened the smaller gate and gestured him through. The Archduchess left instructions. "You're to report to the North Conservatory. Directly." He passed through the familiar hedgerows and shadowed colonnades in silence. The palace had not changed, but the air had. It held a strain of something watchful now, as though the walls themselves waited to see what he would become in their presence. Candles flickered behind the tall windows of the conservatory, their glow softened by the thick glass. Cassian stepped through the side door, blinking at the warmth inside. He found her near the citrus trees, a folded map spread across the marble table, her gloves resting beside a silver compass. "You came back," she said, without looking up. "I said I would." Francesca glanced up, her expression unreadable. "They sent your paper to Vienna's academy." Professor Reichenbach wrote a reply. He called it an articulation of nature's diplomacy. Cassian set the crate beside her. "I brought more than words." She picked up the compass, turned it once in her palm, then set it down. "Reichenbach offered you a post." I read the letter. "I didn't accept." "Why not?" "I didn't come back for a lecture hall." Francesca crossed to the window, the hem of her gown whispering against the tiled floor. "My father requested that I choose my court consort before autumn. The Saxons withdrew last week." He made no protest. Cassian stepped forward. "You're free to choose, then." "I am. But choice demands consequence." She turned to him. "You'll be watched. Judged. They'll question your education, your lineage, your silence at the banquets. I don't speak for applause. No, you speak when it matters." She moved closer, her voice quieter now. "I've asked the council to consider a new position. A minister of land stewardship. One who understands the earth, not just its taxes." Cassian met her gaze. "And they agreed?" "They haven't yet. But they will. My father will see to it." He exhaled, slow and steady. And what will I be to you? Francesca's eyes did not waver. My equal. No declaration could have stirred him more. He reached for her hand, not to kiss it, not for show, just to hold it in his, warm and steady. Later that week, the emperor summoned them both to his private study, where no ministers lingered and no scribes recorded. The room smelled faintly of ink and orange peel. A fire crackled low. Leopold IV stood by the hearth, his hands clasped behind his back. You've caused no scandal, he began, and your name has reached circles I never expected to hear it in. Cassian waited. Francesca has chosen you, the emperor continued, and I will not stand in her way. But understand this, your life ceases to be your own. You will be weighed by strangers who expect you to fail. I'm not afraid of their measure, Cassian said. The emperor nodded once. Good. Because I have no intention of letting my daughter carry a man who cannot bear the weight of empire beside her. Cassian met his gaze. She will never carry me. We'll walk together. Something in the emperor's expression shifted, less approval than understanding. I'll make the announcement at the midsummer court, Leopold said. And until then, you'll stay in the East Wing. Quietly, Cassian bowed his head. Yes, your majesty. Outside the study, Francesca took his hand again, this time without hesitation. We'll need to rehearse the court dances, she said. You've never worn a sash. I'll trip over it. I'll trip with you. They walked together down the corridor, the hush of centuries around them, their footsteps echoing low and sure beneath the vaulted ceiling. Neither smiled. They didn't need to. There was no triumph in their faces, only the calm certainty of people who had waited, who had worked, who had endured, and who had, at last, arrived. The salons of Schönbrunn had begun their spring reawakening, with upholstery freshened, clocks wound, and the scent of beeswax rising from polished parquet. Francesca had not yet been seen at the weekly musicales, a fact noted with whispered curiosity by the court's minor nobility. But behind the doors of the East Wing, she was preparing for her own kind of debut. Cassian stood before the tall mirror in the dressing antechamber, stillness wrapped tightly around his frame. The morning light did little to soften the sharp lines of his formal coat, navy with gold embroidery at the cuffs. His hair had been trimmed, shoes shined, and a new sash green, the color of the imperial steward's order, waited draped over a carved chair. He reached for it, hesitated. I'll tie it, Francesca said, stepping in. He turned, surprised. You're early, and you seem ill at ease. I've worn coats before, but never with a title. She took the sash and stepped close, looping it over his shoulder and across his chest. It's not the title they'll judge. It's your silence. Let it be deliberate, not uncertain. You make it sound like battle. Francesca met his gaze. It always is. Cassian took her hand before she could step away. Why did you really choose this morning for the public announcement? Because the Hungarian ministers are in town, she said. And because they'll hate it. He raised a brow. I wanted our beginning to mean something. She adjusted the pin at his shoulder. Not just to us, but to the order we're reshaping. His reply was quiet. You've always thought in seasons. I only ever thought in soil. Then think of this as spring. She stepped back, appraising him. You'll do. The throne hall was already filling by the time they entered from the northern corridor. A hush spread, the kind that traveled faster than words. The emperor sat beneath the twin eagles of the Habsburg crest, hands folded over his cane, expression unreadable. He gave no signal, only a slight tilt of his head as they approached. Francesca bowed, not as daughter, but heir. Cassian followed with a precise incline of his frame, not deep, not deferential, but respectful. The court watched, uncertain how to breathe. Leopold rose. There are those who say the empire must remain unchanged to survive, he said. That our strength lies in repetition. I disagree. He extended a hand toward Cassian without fanfare. This man has not inherited his place. He has earned it. Through discipline, through service, through a clarity of purpose that this court would do well to learn from. The hall remained silent. Francesca stepped forward. In an age when alliances shift with the wind, I choose a foundation that does not. I choose him. There were no cheers, no applause, only the rustle of silk and the adjusting of stances, the quiet sound of a world beginning to rearrange itself. Later, in the private gardens behind the orangery, Francesca and Cassian walked beneath the early budding branches of the plane trees. She carried a folded note in her hand, unopened. You haven't read it? He asked. It's from my cousin in Prague. I know what it'll say. That I've disgraced the family name. That I've weakened our position in Bohemia. Cassian kept his gaze on the gravel path. Does that worry you? No, but it will worry others. He stopped, turned to her. Then tell me what you want. Not what the ministers need. Not what the provinces expect. Just you. Francesca looked up at the budding canopy overhead. I want a life that doesn't require hiding. I want to walk through these halls without pretending I'm someone else. I want a family that doesn't begin with a contract. Cassian's voice was quiet. Then we'll build it. Room by room. She held his gaze. There's a chapel in the western wing, and used since the war with the Italians. The priest there keeps no records. He understood what she was offering. Not secrecy, but sanctity. A beginning. When, he asked. Before anyone can stop us. He didn't smile. He only reached for her hand, and together they turned back toward the palace, toward the forgotten chapel with its flaking frescoes and dust-covered pews. Inside, the priest gave no sermon. He simply opened the book and asked the questions that mattered. And when Francesca answered, it was not with a title or a vow made for nations, it was only her voice, steady and clear. Cassian answered with the same. As they stepped into the wind outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting long beams across the gravel and stone. No bells rang. No banners flew. But Francesca lifted her face to the light, and for the first time in years, she laughed without caution. Cassian looked at her, memorizing it again. I told you, she said. Spring. And this time, he believed her.